Hey, what is up, everybody? This is Steve Breach coming to you here today. We are almost home, on our way home from work. I just made a video about Rhino going into the WWE Hall of Fame, and one thing that came to my mind as I was making it is I do not understand why AJ Styles is not in the TNA Hall of Fame. Today, in this world where we see like Jordan Grace being featured on NXT, Joe Hendry being featured on NXT, there's definitely some sort of a working relationship where NXT sends their people here, we send their people there, everybody pats each other on the back. Why has a phone call not been made where AJ Styles is put into the TNA Hall of Fame? Is there a bigger name that needs to be in there? I think that AJ Styles honestly should have been the first name ever put into the TNA Hall of Fame. I know that they thought the writing was on the wall when Sting was inducted, I believe in 2012, that they thought every year when Sting's contract was up, was it going to be the last contract? Was he going to leave TNA? Was he going to go to WWE for the so-called Undertaker match that everybody thought was going to happen? Is that why they put Sting in first? And then the next year would be the year they ended up putting in Kurt Angle, who was still full-time wrestling at the time. He had a match with Robert Roode on the Bound for Glory pay-per-view the night after he put in, and there was no like retirement angle or anything like that. He ended up working there for a long damn time before he finally went back to WWE, and then he ended up wrestling there. But was it because the contract at the time with AJ Styles didn't look good? I still don't understand why they didn't put him in there. AJ Styles was a rookie in WCW. He's wrestling as a tag team. There was Air Styles and Air Paris. They have some really good matches in the dying days of WCW. WCW ends up being closed. He goes to developmental for WWE. I don't think he was one of the contracts that they picked up, but I think that he was somebody that they saw that this could be something. But he didn't want to move and take away from his wife going to school. He didn't want to make his whole family uproot from where they were in Georgia, where he's been able to live his whole career, and that's where he is on that company that Jerry Sags and Greg Valentine ran with Jimmy Hart. He ends up going there. He's a free agent. He wrestles for Ring of Honor at the time. He ends up going to TNA because of the whole Rob Feinstein situation. He ends up having to pick one or the other. He ends up going to TNA, and he has one of the biggest runs of all time. I think there was talk of was he too young to put the championship on at the time when TNA was trying to find a television deal? Was he a name that was not big enough that people would get behind it? Is that way Jeff Jarrett held the strap for so long? But when they got their new show on Spike TV, I remember that there was a poll online. Who should wrestle in the first match of Impact? And AJ Styles killed the thing. I can honestly tell you at the time, I did not know who AJ Styles was, but I was watching the first episode of TNA on cable TV. I wanted to watch Impact, and he came out there, and I said, well, if he won this poll, that the people who continuously watch TNA, I gotta watch this guy. And he blew me away. And from there, I don't understand why he stayed in TNA so long. He ended up staying there until he had his run in 2013, and he had his ups and he had his downs. If you can remember when Hogan came in with Bischoff, they didn't think that he was a big enough deal, that he was the main event guy that somebody would care about. They didn't think that his character was somebody that they believed in, so they strapped him with Ric Flair and said, AJ, you need to become Ric Flair. They even, asked him to dye his hair blonde at one time. If you go back to when Ric Flair was really having problems with WCW, one of the things that they wanted him to do was no longer be known as Ric Flair. They wanted him to, pierce his ear, and they wanted to call him Spartacus. They thought that would be a fresh coat of paint for Ric Flair, who had been there, and that would make people really care about him. And Flair was like, "Fuck this." He bounced and he went to WWF. I don't know. I know that Ric Flair was just doing what he was told because he needed the job and he needed to get paid. But I'm surprised that Flair would work with AJ doing the same exact thing that pissed him off to the point where he left WCW. He was doing the same thing to AJ Styles in TNA. But, main event matches here, there, and everywhere, it just makes sense to me. AJ Styles, TNA Hall of Fame. I honestly thought it was going to happen a few years ago. And it still hasn't happened yet. It needs to happen next year.